Story 1. This happened a few days ago, and honestly, I'm still trying to gather myself and deal with the security issues that this whole ordeal left me with. I'm a fairly new mother to a beautiful baby boy. My husband and I were blessed to have him 6 months ago. Everything was difficult at first, but it's starting to get better these days. We're figuring out how to do things properly, how to plan our lives around the baby's needs, and so much more. Let's just say that we're in a good place now, even though we were not when we first had our baby. That's what matters. A few days ago, my husband and I were visiting his parents. They live around 20 minutes away from us, and we always have a wonderful time there. They're very supportive, and my mother-in-law was a lifesaver when I first had my baby. She gave me all the help I didn't even know I needed. I really love this woman. As I said, they're lovely people, and we had a really good time with them. At around 7 p.m. or so, we decided to call it a day and head home. When we got into our car, I remembered we needed some items for the baby and some groceries from the local store. So we headed there, my husband, our little baby in his stroller, and I. For the sake of this story, you need to know that I have a black belt in Taekwondo, a 6-degree black belt. There are more details to this, but I'm not here to lecture you about the sport I grew up with. So I digress. Anyways, at this point, we entered the store, me pushing our shopping cart and trying to fill it up with all the items I needed, hoping I wouldn't forget anything like I do every single time, while my husband pushed the stroller with our sweet boy sleeping in it. Sadly, it only took us 10 minutes before we started hearing the dreaded "excuse me" from behind us. We knew what that meant. We hoped it wasn't what we feared, but it could easily be a mega Karen on the hunt, judging from the tone she used. I turned around, and there she was, a woman in her 40s with a face filled with some ungodly makeup. I hesitated to answer her, but with the stare she was giving me, I couldn't help but say, yes. She responded with, "Hi, I've been following you for the past 10 minutes, since you stepped into the store. I just couldn't help myself but be fascinated with your baby stroller. I was wondering, where can I get one?" In my head, the math didn't add up. What she was asking was kind of normal. Someone seeing something they like in public and asking the owner where they got it. But I couldn't ignore the part where she kept following us for 10 full minutes before talking to us. That didn't seem normal to me. But I decided to just tell her where we got it and be done with it. "Oh, we bought it from a certain store. It's a bit more expensive than some strollers out there, but it's really comfy, and thankfully we were able to afford it." "Wow, that's nice. Can I ask how much you paid for it?" I gave my husband a quick hesitant look before turning back to her and telling her it was around $2,000 or so. Upon telling her that, her jaw dropped. She started saying, "Wow, that's a lot of money for a stroller. You must be rich. If you can buy something like this, then you must be rich." We didn't feel comfortable hearing that. You never feel comfortable when someone tells you that you're basically having it easy. It's never easy, but that's just how they make you feel sometimes. Anyways, we nodded politely, smiled awkwardly, and turned to leave and continue with our shopping. That's when she jumped right in front of us and confronted us with the most absurd demand I had ever faced. "What do you say? You give me that stroller for my baby, and you get yourself a brand new one since you can easily afford it. Huh?" We were shocked for a moment. Then I told her, "I'm sorry, we can't do that." I then turned to my husband and said, "We need to go." But this time, she stopped us again, put her hand on our stroller, and yelled, "Why can't you just do one good thing in your life and hand me this stroller? It's nothing to people like you. My baby and I deserve it more anyways. You know what? I demand you help out a single mother and give me this darn thing." My husband told her, "Get away from my family, and don't you dare follow us or try to stop us again, you crazy woman." Then she stood in our way one last time and said one of the craziest things I have ever heard in my entire life. She said, "If you're going to call me crazy, then I'll show you crazy. I'll take your brat and won't give him back until you hand me that stroller and walk away." As she said this, she stretched her hands into our stroller, trying to grab our baby and take him away. I saw red. I never thought that was a real thing, but it is, and I never thought I'd earn the Mama Bear badge that quickly. I remember seeing my husband stop her hands from reaching our baby inside the stroller and trying to push her away from us. Then she escalated her behavior and just flat out hit him across the face with her purse. Things went blank for me for a moment, and I only came to my senses when I saw my left foot flying towards the side of this woman's head, and then bam. direct hit to the head. She got knocked out cold instantly and laid there on the ground without a move. My husband collected himself, hugged me and our baby, and then tried to get us out of there. We moved towards the entrance as more people started gathering to see what was going on. But we were met by two security guards followed by the store manager. My husband sternly told them not to lay a single finger on any of us. But the manager asked him nicely to please calm down and wait for the police to arrive since he had called them already. Some woman was lying there on the ground, and he couldn't just let us go before the whole thing got sorted out by the cops. We complied, waited for a bit, and then the cops arrived shortly after. Two of the cops moved towards us, while the other two went with the manager to check the footage. At the time, the woman was starting to wake up. The emergency medical technicians were around her when she opened her eyes and started shrieking, more like wailing. It was horrifying to listen to. The cops were nice enough not to detain me or my husband until they figured out what went down, especially after they saw how shaken I was. They got our side of the story, which was eventually confirmed by the security footage and some other customers who witnessed what happened. The woman was put in handcuffs while screaming at everyone around her. She even tried attacking the emergency medical technicians at one point, but failed to stand up properly and fell back to the floor. It seemed as if she had some sort of concussion or something. We decided to press charges, of course, and we informed the officers we were willing to take this as far as it may go. We wanted to make sure this woman paid for the terrifying experience she put us through. God only knows what she would have done to our baby if she had managed to fully grab him. So no, I will never settle, and I will even sue her for emotional damage on top of everything else. I'll make sure her life as she knows it is no more, and I hope her child is raised by a better person than she is. Story 2. Backstory. 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my two cousins, who were both in their early 20s, alone to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, put a clause in their will that grandkids would receive half of their share of the inheritance if a parent passed before the children reached age 30, and then the other half when my grandparents eventually passed. Both my cousins received a very sizable inheritance, coupled with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the two paid off her college loans and was able to buy property. She still lives on the same plot of land. The older sibling blew all of his money, straight out of a book. Within 6 years, he was back to living in a condo, working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance issue, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer salary and buying copious amounts of code word substances. The next 4 years, my cousin went to rehab 3 times, sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. Absolutely wretched woman. She saw my grandparents as payday and essentially baby-trapped my cousin, thinking it was her ticket. Within 7 years, they had 3 kids, so she was locked in tight. She's a nurse, and with 3 kids around, they always needed a little boost. Guess who they would always ask? You got it, my grandparents. Being the kind spirits they are, they always lent a hand. My father, mother, sister, and I got sick of it very quickly. My grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandpa as the last remaining. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorite among the grandkids, which left a real sore spot with my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this, so much so that whenever they came to visit and I was not home, they would send their 3 children into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors, so it couldn't be locked. This was the start. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went as far as placing one of those little mechanical noisemakers in the cabinet in my room, the ones that play sounds at random intervals that make you think you're insane. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so, she finally found it. They did this to distance me and deter me from taking care of Grandpa, so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of the kids found my gun. By this time, I was 18 and in the possession of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather has guns, but cannot aim and shoot them anymore due to arthritis and also nerve degeneration. So when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my hands should the need for self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be hell to raise. Being very well trained with guns and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in my nightstand with the key on a high shelf out of reach of the children. One fateful day, I was out getting my grandfather's food when I came home, and my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather were staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun that I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always kept a magazine in the lockbox but never loaded it into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it. As a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was for, load my gun, and chamber it. I tried my best to explain that what my cousin had said was nonsense, and that I never kept my firearms loaded in the house. But my cousin, who is a police officer, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave. He hadn't arrested me yet, because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had one, or so he thought. The next day, I apologized to Grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the children could have gotten the key. He agreed with me, and he apologized but thought it best I move out until things cooled down. But once they did, I would be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to the disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I am still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad, as they had sealed payday with Grandpa. It was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or two. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. Our 2 cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' requests. Then the miracle line in the will came to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive and will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father was supposed to receive every piece of physical property from my grandparents, as he was the only remaining child aside from 2 or 3 items set aside for me. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of Grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and medals was extensive, to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces didn't make it right. It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house ASAP, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to go to him anyways, so his actions were purely his own since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with the lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything, formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes worth of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter, ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen, wondering why it was all there when my cousin walked in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up, and he put 2 and 2 together that I had set him up. Which was true, but there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed so he would mess himself up. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and me, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still weeping over Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes to make him contemplate his sanity. Over greed. My cousin's nasty wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years as he is all but disgraced now.